All right, Becoming a World Power, Part 3, our new foreign policy. We have our empire, what are we going to do with it? So we enter the new century with a massively improved Navy, a relatively effective armed fighting force, a humongous economy, and Teddy Roosevelt as president. So we have all kinds of new things we're going to be doing. And the first thing that we set our sights on is the Panama Canal. This has been a long dream of American interventionists. They've wanted to figure out a way to cut through Central America, to cut ship journeys in actually more than in half. To get from New York to San Francisco all the way around South America is going to be basically 13,000 miles. But if we could cut through, in Panama maybe, it would cut us down to about a 5,200 mile trip instead. And that would open up, not just to help out with military stuff, right? Because when we were fighting the Spanish-American War, a few years before this, we had our fleet in the Atlantic and the fleet in the Pacific. And if one of those fleets got into trouble, it would take a long time to go all the way down around South America to meet up with the other fleet. Now, thankfully, our fleets weren't the one in trouble during the Spanish-American War. But looking ahead, a president like Teddy Roosevelt that sees more conflicts like this coming, it's an issue. But even more than that, money. We transport a ton of stuff by boat, even today. Even 2020, the cheapest, safest, most effective way to transport a ton of goods and services, imports, exports, is by boat. So if we could cut that distance in half, we could make a lot more money. So Teddy Roosevelt and other folks in the American government and other folks in sort of the American business class that really want this money-making opportunity, they've identified a place in Panama that would be the shortest possible way to get from one ocean to the other. It would be the easiest canal to build, it would be the cheapest canal to build, and it would be the quickest canal to travel through. So we go to Colombia, because at the time, Panama is not a separate country. So we can kind of get a close-up of these countries here. Panama is actually a province, basically a state, of the country of Colombia. It's part of Colombia. So we go down to Colombia, to their capital city, Bogota, and we say, hey, we'd love to buy some land to put in this canal. What do you say? And Colombia was like, no, we don't want you guys anywhere near our country. Stay out, please and thank you. Well, you don't really tell Teddy Roosevelt to stay out, please and thank you. So Teddy Roosevelt, President Teddy Roosevelt now, because President McKinley got assassinated in 1901, Teddy Roosevelt was vice president, boom, Teddy Roosevelt's president. He tells Panama they should be independent. He goes up to Panama and says, hey, how would you like to be your own country instead of part of Colombia? And Panama agrees, in large part because they're promised to be paid a ton of money so we can buy that land, so we can build that canal. And so they, in 1903, start a revolution against Colombia in order to be free and independent, kind of like we did, kind of like Cuba did, right? And Colombia figures, we'll just stomp this out real quick and it won't be a big deal. Well, when their armed forces get to Panama, they notice a bunch of U.S. warships with huge guns on them there to basically keep an eye on things. And not too long after that, a bunch of U.S. warships show up also on the coast of Colombia, this time very near the capital city of Bogota, close enough that you could see the boats from Bogota and close enough that the boats could just fire on Bogota. So the threat was clear. Now, we weren't getting involved, we were just there to keep an eye on things. But the threat was clear enough that the revolution is basically over in less than a year, Panama gains its independence, immediately we buy the land, the Hay-Bunau-Berea Treaty. I don't think you're gonna need to remember that name. But basically the deal was we help them gain their independence, we get our canal. Deal's done, deal is made, we're good. So let's take a look at a couple of different visions of Teddy Roosevelt, because Teddy Roosevelt was a guy before he was president, but definitely as president, that you loved him or you hated him. And you can always tell how a political cartoonist thinks of Teddy Roosevelt by how he's drawn in the picture. So based on some clues in this picture, where do you think? Do you think he's up at a 10 in this artist's opinion, or is he down at a 1? Does this artist really like him, or does this artist not like him a lot at all? And we can take a look at a few clues here. Now, just to get a couple of things out of the way, the big dude with the cannon, that's Teddy Roosevelt. The cannon is the cannons on the boats we had. And the little dude down there in the center, the little feather on his cap says Columbia. So that represents Columbia. Teddy Roosevelt represents himself and America. And the cannon represents our gunships. And so let's take a look at Teddy Roosevelt and sort of the idea here. It kind of looks like a bully here, right? Like he's got this giant cannon. He's this huge dude up against this very small person. Kind of a bully situation. And you also see his face. You see the glasses, definitely a Teddy Roosevelt pair of glasses. The mustache, definitely the Teddy Roosevelt mustache. And the toothy grin, definitely the Teddy Roosevelt toothy grin. But his face is kind of smooshed in and wrinkled. And his hat is kind of wrinkled, and his outfit's kind of wrinkled. So this guy doesn't like Teddy Roosevelt much. And how many weapons? Hold on. How many weapons? 1, 2, 3, 4 on his belt. 5 the sword. 6 that other sword. 7 the musket with or the rifle with the bayonet. 8, 9 the swords next to him. So he's got 9 weapons on him, more than he could ever need, more than he can hold, more than he can fit on his belt, right? So this is definitely, there's a lot of clues here. I don't know that this artist has him at a 1, but not any higher than a 4. This political cartoonist is not a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt. And if you're asking the question, well, what would Teddy Roosevelt look like in a political cartoon where the political cartoonist likes him? Ta-da! You have the glasses, Teddy Roosevelt. You have the mustache, Teddy Roosevelt. You don't have the big toothy grin. But, other than that, very clearly Teddy Roosevelt. And here, before we take a look at the rest of the political cartoon, you can see how he's drawn, right? He's got a very strong stance. His back is straight. He's standing tall, very tall as it turns out. But his clothes are well taken care of. They're clean. Now he's got a few wrinkles in the shirt, but that's because he's a man rolling up his sleeves to do a man's work. No wrinkles in the face, very strong jawline on the drawing there. So you can definitely tell that this political cartoonist is definitely 6 or a 7 or even higher, right? So this guy is a fan of Teddy Roosevelt. Now let's take a look at what he's doing. He's digging a big hole. Oh, he's literally digging the Panama Canal. Some Paul Bunyan, Pecos Bill kind of tall tale stuff, right? And he's digging out the dirt. He's throwing the dirt onto that. Hard to see, and it's an old copy of this political cartoon. It's not always easy to make out the details. But that's a city in the background with the label Bogota. So that's the capital city of Colombia. So clearly he's just we're going to throw the dirt on Bogota, forget them, into the future. Let's dig this canal. And the boats down there, yes, there's some warships, but also there's some merchant ships that are there to transport goods. So it's a war thing, and it's also a money thing. Very American. So let's talk about the Panama Canal for a minute, just as a useful thing. The revolution was 1903. Panama Canal construction begins in 1904. We don't waste any time. And it takes about 10 years to finish. And you can see the picture on the bottom there. That's the actual digging out. It wasn't actually a giant Teddy Roosevelt with a shovel. Sorry. We had digging machines. We had trains pulling the dirt out. We had the whole system set up. So a decade of industrial strength digging. And we dig it out, and you can see the part of the finished product right over here. And you have this system of locks and channels. Now, if you didn't grow up around the water, this isn't like going to be on the star test thing, but basically you can't really go like uphill in the water or downhill in the water. Water doesn't really work that way. And unfortunately, on one side of Panama is the Atlantic Ocean, and on the other side of Panama is the Pacific Ocean, and they are two different heights. Not by a lot, but by like enough that if you just dug a hole, then it would be like a hill, and the water would just flow down, and you couldn't really it'd be a whole mess. So whenever humans have to build a connecting area between two bodies of water of different water heights, we use a system of locks and channels. And what you do is you bring your boat in, and they lock in back and in front of it, and then they raise the water level. And then they open this door, and you go through, and then they close the door behind you, and then they raise the water level. And you just do that however many times you need to do that. This section of the Panama Canal has 3 locks in it. So you would go in, go up, go in, go up, and then go to the next part that would have more locks in it. The actual entire journey through the Panama Canal takes actually more than a few hours. But there's YouTube videos that they have ones that are fast forwarded, which is what I'd recommend if you want to watch and see what it looks like. And then there's also non-fast forwarded ones. If you need something calm and relaxing on in the background while you're doing something else, not a bad choice. But I wouldn't just sit there and watch it. It takes too long. So that technology, that level of industrial digging, we're able to get a canal that cuts the time to travel from one side of the U.S. to the other side of the U.S. via boat in half, which is very good for our military and very good for our economy, the money. So we're going to take a look at how, now that we have this empire, now that we've started stretching our muscles, right? We got Hawaii. We, basically did the same thing with Panama and Colombia. Let's take a look at how the next 3 presidents are going to use this power. First, Roosevelt, who's the first one to flex on this because he can. He has what he calls his big stick diplomacy. It's from his sort of famous phrase. He says this in a lot of speeches. He says his foreign policy, his way to deal with other countries, is to speak softly or walk softly and carry a big stick. The idea there is that we don't need to talk a big game. We don't need to make a big display out of it. But if everybody knows our military is strong, and if everybody knows our economy is strong, then we don't have to make any threats. We don't have to go to war. If everybody already knows we're going to defeat them, either economically or militarily, why would they even fight? We just need to be that strong. And you can see here in the political cartoon that he's literally a policeman with a big nightstick. And you can kind of tell that this political cartoon likes him a bit. He doesn't have the smush face with the wrinkles. He's a big dude standing in between people. He's getting gifts. He's getting stuff. So another political cartoonist that likes him. So that's Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy. And specifically, he lays that out as a new addition to the Monroe Doctrine. Remember the Monroe Doctrine? President Monroe in the 1820s was like, Europe, you stay away from the Western Hemisphere. We'll handle our business here, thank you. And Europe didn't care because our Navy had 3 boats in the 1820s. But in the 1900s, 1901, 1902, after the Spanish-American War, after Roosevelt takes over, we have a much bigger Navy, a much more powerful army, and a very powerful economy. So Roosevelt keeps the Monroe Doctrine around, but he sort of changes the focus, right? Instead of trying to keep Europe out, he still says, Europe, just stay out of our business. We're going to take care of our hemisphere. The focus is no longer on isolationism, it's on interventionism. We are no longer isolating ourselves from the rest of the world and telling them to deal with their own business so we can deal with ours. We are expanding what our business is to the entire Western Hemisphere. We are expanding, the understanding our business is the business of Latin America, is the business of Central America, is the business of South America. And he says that if anything were to happen in the Western Hemisphere that would destabilize the political and economic situation, we would step in to stabilize it. So if something goes wrong in Colombia, we're not just going to let Colombia do what it wants to do. We're going to step in and get involved. So, the Roosevelt Corollary. Who is this for? Now, Teddy Roosevelt would tell you it's for Latin American interests. We're trying to help our neighbors. If things get weird and there's bloody revolutions happening, we can step in and we can stop it and we can save these people and protect their money and protect this. And any of you believe Roosevelt on that one? That he's doing this for them? Now this is a YouTube video. I can't see your little faces here on the Zoom window, but I do see some of you shaking your head. This is not for Latin America. This is not for their interests. This is not because we care about them. It's also not for European interests. The only thing Roosevelt is interested, as far as Europe is concerned, is that they stay out of our business in all of America. Now, what about the American interests? Is it for our interests? Yes, of course. If something happens in another country, in the Americas, Central America, South America, and it's bad for the U.S., Roosevelt has basically said, we will step in, we will handle it, and we will protect American interests. Us, America, the USA. And then, of course, is it for Teddy Roosevelt's interests? Well, it's something Teddy Roosevelt did, so of course it's for his own interest. Teddy Roosevelt was very concerned about making sure things were good for Teddy Roosevelt. And some folks weren't a big fan of that. A lot of Latin American governments become pretty angry because Roosevelt keeps sending our Navy, keeps sending our Marines, keeps sending our troops to intervene when things are going bad in South America and Central America. And to this day, with pretty good reason, because the stuff that happened with Roosevelt, the stuff that happened during the Cold War, stuff that happened in a lot of our shared history, a lot of South American governments and Central American governments don't really trust the American government. And it's hard to blame them. But you can also kind of tell here that these political cartoons did not like Roosevelt. He's got the squishy, wrinkly face. In one of them, he's dressed up as the Queen of England. So, yeah, no. And also, a lot of people in Congress didn't like this because they thought he was seizing too much power as president, and he was taking too much power, and Congress was losing power. So they were not happy with him either. And 1908 rolls around, and Teddy Roosevelt does this whole, I did 2 terms, and if that was enough for Washington, it's enough for me. And he steps down. And his buddy, William Howard Taft, takes over. And Taft, his idea of diplomacy is to skip the whole military nonsense. Yes, we have a big Navy. Yes, we have a powerful military. But, why use them? Why shoot bullets? Why risk lives when we can just take those bullets and use dollars instead? We can use our economy as a weapon. We can use our economy to get the foreign policy we need. So let's say we are arguing with another government, and they don't do what we want them to do. Well, Roosevelt would send in the military. Taft would cut off trade to that country, and they're going to lose more money than we're going to lose. And that's going to bring them back to the negotiating table. That's Taft's dollar diplomacy. If a country's not doing what we want them to do, we can basically bribe them to do it. Why use a military at all? I mean, keep a military for self-defense, but why attack with it when we can just pay off whoever we need to pay off? That's Taft. Now, he serves for 4 years, and Roosevelt hates him, and he tries to run again. And Taft runs again, Roosevelt runs again, and they both lose to Woodrow Wilson. Now, we'll get into Woodrow Wilson when we talk about World War I. We'll talk about his strengths as a war president. Honestly, him as president during World War I is probably a good thing for the country overall. However, he's also one of our most racist presidents, and he sort of helps the Ku Klux Klan come out of retirement. So, there's a lot of Americans he wasn't a good president at all for, and we'll talk about that. But for right now, let's talk about his moral diplomacy. So he's up next, 1912, wins the election. And there's a big, bloody Mexican Revolution going on, just south of our border. And back then, like today, a lot of our businesses are very much entangled with Mexican businesses. We have American factories down there with Mexican workers. We have American farms and plantations down there with Mexican workers. We have all kinds of stuff, money and commerce and stuff flowing across the border back and forth, just like we do today. Same exact situation. Well, not exact, but similar situation. Lots of money going up and down the border. And the American businesses who have a lot of business interests and investments in Mexico are asking Woodrow Wilson, please get involved to save our investments, to protect American money interests in Mexico. And Woodrow Wilson kind of says, you know what? I am going to get involved, but not because of the money, because it's the right thing to do. It will be the morally good and correct thing to do here. Because the guy running the Mexican Revolution, Victoriano Huerta, Woodrow Wilson thought he was a horrible person who would be a butcher like General Wieland in the Cuban Revolution, and he would kill a bunch of Mexican people, and he'd be a terrible person and a tyrant and a dictator. And as America, we need to do the right thing. And that was Woodrow Wilson's moral diplomacy. We should intervene in other countries' businesses, not necessarily for the money, not necessarily for the power and the influence, but because it's the right thing to do to help other people. So what do you think? Which diplomacy is the most effective? I don't have an answer. I'm not going to be like, next slide, boom, this one, because that's not how it works, right? In the modern era in the U.S. in U.S. history, and by that I mean like today, and 4 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 20 years ago, basically my entire life, we've used a combination of these three, right? Our Navy is big and powerful enough that you could pick any other 10 navies on Earth and put us against those 10 combined navies, and we'd probably still win. Honestly, actually, we'd definitely still win at that point. You need 14 or 15 navies to maybe make it a fair fight. So that's the walk softly, carry a big stick, right? We have overwhelming military force between our Navy, our infantry soldiers, our nuclear weapons. There's not another country on Earth that can threaten us militarily. And so that means if we tell another country, here's what we want you to do, and the threat behind it is look at our giant military, well, we won't have to go to war, probably. And that's Roosevelt's diplomacy. Now, the dollar diplomacy we make very good use of by setting embargoes on certain countries that aren't playing nice, that aren't doing what we want them to do. North Korea, Iran, Cuba, all of those countries, you cannot buy American stuff in those countries, and you can't sell to Americans, which is a lot of money that you're going to lose. It's a big problem for those countries. And the idea is eventually they'll need us more, they'll need what they're losing more than we will miss what we're losing, and they'll come back to the negotiating table and we'll be able to figure something out without shooting a single gun, without killing a single person, just using our economy and the threat of getting excluded from our economy. And then, of course, a lot of the wars we've fought over the last few years, we've done because we think it's a morally good thing to do. You go back to when I was a kid, the Gulf War in the 1990s, and George H.W. Bush, not W's dad, right? George Bush the elder, if we're using ancient Greek style naming conventions. Bush the Elder, when he invaded Iraq to defend Kuwait in the Persian Gulf War, he said that, you can go back and watch speeches and stuff, but he basically says Saddam Hussein is a tyrant, he's a dictator, he's a terrible person, and we need to defend our allies from this cruel dictator who's going to be just a terrible person to them. And that's the moral argument, right? So we do all three of these in the modern world. But it's important for you to think about the way that you would prefer to go about it. Because anytime you elect somebody who has something to do with our foreign policy, president's a big one, not the only one, but a big one, they are going to have a preferred way of dealing with these things. And one of the things, not the only thing, but one of the things you should consider when you're deciding who to vote for is how they're going to handle their foreign policy. So if you're thinking like Roosevelt, and you're going to want someone that's going to build up the army and keep the army as powerful as possible. If you're thinking more like Taft, you're going to want someone that's going to not use the army as much, but use money instead. And if you think that the U.S. has a moral obligation to do good around the world, and Wilson's moral diplomacy is what you'd want to look for in a candidate. Again, not the only thing to look for, but definitely one of them. So, have a good day. If you're watching this at the appropriate time, the quiz is tomorrow. Quiz is on Friday. So, we'll see you then. Have a wonderful day. Ciao.